Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new League of Legends video. In this video, we will be going over another top 5 list. I feel like I have not updated this specific type of list for quite some time, and I truly believe that there are quite a bit of AP mid lane champions right now that are very strong, just not seen so often. So in this list, we will be going over those type of champions I feel like are simply underrated, not seen so often in the mid lane, or just simply in League of Legends, but I feel like they have a lot of potential. As always, don't forget, this video is my personal opinions and thoughts. Some of you may disagree, some of you may agree. And I also want to say that there are definitely more than 5 underrated AP mids, but I had to choose 5 for the sake of the video. So with all of that out of the way, let's go right into the number 5 spot. In this spot, I decided to put the Hui master himself, Mordekaiser. Now Mordekaiser, for those of you that are unaware, used to be my main back in something like season 2. But he just recently got buffed and I really want to pick him up again, and I must say, he really isn't all that bad. Is he the strongest underrated AP mid laner in the game, or just simply the strongest AP mid laner in the game? Well, probably not. But I definitely think he's worth picking up. The great thing I like about Mordekaiser is that he isn't a champion that is solely reliant on having a good score. I mean, you always want to go in there and be right in the middle of the fight, dishing out as much damage as you can, trying to ensure you get that ghost with your ultimate, and overall just being much like a Karthus is. I mean, in order to get your passive going and just constantly maxed out, you have to be in the middle of the fight, pretty much hitting as many people as possible with every single ability that you have. Now, the main reasons as to why I feel like Mordekaiser is definitely worth checking out again is because of the buffs he just recently received. For instance, he can now use his W on allies, while also getting increased move speed whenever you are walking towards that other ally with your W on them, or vice versa. I do feel like his ultimate is better now, because his ultimate will now give you HP and not AD from the ghost that you obtain. And in the vice versa sense, the ghost itself now gets a flat amount of AD, not a percentage of Mordekaiser's AD, because let's be honest, Mordekaiser isn't gonna have the biggest amount of AD, especially if you're building him somewhat correctly. And I really love the fact that Lichbane plus Q is just a great synergy with Mordekaiser, and the fact that he's so great at farming because he can simply push in the wave in just a matter of seconds, maybe go take the Wraiths, or which now are the Buzzards or whatever they're called, and eventually will just become this sort of unstoppable monster. The cons of Mordekaiser: his kit has absolutely no CC, and probably the biggest con that he has. Early game, his laning phase isn't the best. Again, he does rely on his passive in order to just not get chunked down very quickly, and early in the game it's hard to build up that passive because the damage you do really isn't that good. And the final thing is that, like I said, you want to be in the middle of the team fight, so he is very reliant on constantly dishing out damage and hitting enemies for his passive to be pretty much just built up. But it works much like a double-edged sword. I mean, yeah, it's great, he's always in the middle of the fight dealing a lot of damage, taking a lot of damage as well, but if you're in the middle of the fight and he gets CC'd down, well, you're not going to get a lot of damage out, and you'll probably get bursted down since, again, you couldn't get your passive going. But let's go on to the number 4 spot, and this is a champion I've recently really started to like. I mean, Zhao showed an amazing performance on him in the LCS, and I feel like he's definitely going to be becoming more popular. Now, Karthus has always been one of those champions in the mid lane that everyone knew, yeah, he's strong, yeah, he has a lot of potential, but almost no one ever really played him. Now, the reason for that, I'm not always 100% sure of. I mean, I guess just other champions were able to do what Karthus does better, maybe like LeBlanc. But I really feel like this champion is ridiculously underrated. I mean, he has an absurd, and I mean absolutely disgustingly absurd damage in the late game. The longer the game goes, the stronger he becomes. He is also surprisingly safe in the laning phase. His kit doesn't really offer him any escapes from ganks, but he can farm very safely with his Q. He has probably among the best presence in teamfights of any AP mid laner. Similar to a Mordekaiser, he's going to be wanting to rush into the middle of the fight, turn on that E, just damage as many people as possible, spamming your Q all over the enemy team, getting your wall on top of them to slow them down, reduce their armor, die eventually because you want to proc your passive, throw in a few more Qs, and then pop that ultimate and just finish everyone off. So he's another example of a champion that doesn't really rely on having an amazing score because you are going to be dying a lot for a good purpose. Here are the cons of Karthus. I mean, you're probably going to get carpal tunnel syndrome from spamming his Q probably a million times in one game. Not the very best poke. I mean, yeah, his Q is definitely pretty nice, but when you compare it to something like a Vel'Koz, maybe a Xerath, it really isn't that amazing. And on top of that, he's not mobile whatsoever. But I do highly recommend picking him up. Let's move our way into the top 3 underrated AP mids, with the first one being Kenan. I quickly want to say that Karthus was extremely close to being number 3, if not higher. But talking about Kenan, I mean, I feel like this champion is definitely going to be moving his way up in the rankings of solo queue. He really is not weak whatsoever, dealing a lot of damage and really just after the recent buffs becoming a lot more of a threat. I love his Q ability because it has great range, it has a lot of damage, the cooldown on it is quite low, the energy cost isn't anything ridiculous, and it really is just a nice ability to poke with. His ultimate also recently got buffed to the point where if a champion is inside your ultimate but is not actually getting hit by it, you can still activate your W and the W will hit them. This is huge because Kenan's ultimate only hits one target at a time, so if you don't hit that target and you don't have any other passive marks on that target, your W will not do anything. But this really lets Kenan deal a lot more AoE damage. Kenan also is known to be able to stun lock a target for quite some time if you use your abilities in the correct sequence. And on top of being able to stun lock them, the burst potential is absolutely ridiculous. I feel like his E ability is a little underrated. I mean, everyone always talks about his Q, his W, and his ultimate, but his E ability giving him resistance is much needed for a damage assassin, on top of giving him the extra move speed, whether it's to chase or to escape, really is the whole reason Kenan is Kenan. I mean, a lot of the times you see Kenans activate their ultimate and then just E right there in the middle of the team fight. So overall, his E ability is just amazing. The cons of Kenan: his ultimate only hits one target at a time like I mentioned earlier, and it can be a little awkward for newer players to play this champion. Because again, in order to properly damage your opponents and stun lock them in the proper way, you have to use your abilities in the correct sequence. And if you're not familiar with Kenan, well, it's gonna be difficult. Alright, let's go into the top 2 spots. And now I do want to mention that these next 2 champions, Vel'Koz in the number 1 spot, are champions that will probably be moving into my top 5 list eventually, as I feel like they deserve it. But these 2 are definitely ones to look out for. So the first one is going to be Vel'Koz, our favorite tentacle champion. I included him in a lot of my top 5 underrated lists, and I'm still including him even now because he's still underrated. I'm honestly not sure why more people don't play him. I mean, he's been a lot more popular recently in the support lane, but I mean, mid lane? Where are the mid lane Vel'Kozes? He's so strong. He has low cooldown on almost every single ability. He can constantly be throwing them out, dealing a ridiculous amount of damage, especially if he gets your passive proc. You're able to cast your W while you're moving, which is great because he's again not the safest of champions, so you have to be able to move around constantly while dishing out damage. With the fact that his W has 2 charges, much like a Teemo Shroom or something of the sort, you can just throw it out there, it hits the champion twice, so if you combine it with your E and your ultimate slow, that's gonna be a lot of damage, especially with your passive. And speaking of his passive, I really do feel like it's a little too strong. The fact that it deals true damage, not magic damage, is absurd. When looking at champions and their burst combos, so for instance, using a full rotation of spells, or every single spell that you have on one target, Vel'Koz probably has among the highest potentials. Not only just him being able to do a lot of damage with his abilities and being able to use his W twice if you use the combo properly, but you'll get off your passive probably 3 times as well. And I think his ultimate is a little too strong and probably needs a little nerfs, because his ultimate, even though it does a lot of damage, has great range, goes through every single target, procs his passive every fraction of a second, it's just too strong. And on top of that, it also slows the target, which is the part I feel like should be removed. I don't think it should be slowing the target. Too strong. Overall, he is really just a strong champion and I recommend picking him up. But the cons, again, much like Xerath, he's purely skill shot oriented. Now the thing with him and Xerath, and the reason I think Xerath is just picked over Vel'Koz, is because Xerath is safer. He can dish out the damage from longer range. However, Vel'Koz is a bit more of a ham version of Xerath, not as safe, but his damage potential is much higher. And the number 1 most underrated AP mid laner in the game at the moment, I truly, honestly believe it's Viktor. Now I know Viktor has been seen in the LCS quite recently, but he's still very underrated. I feel like high ELO players understand his power, but anyone lower than maybe Diamond or even Platinum are just simply not even aware yet. They're a little late to the party and I hope that this can change their mind. The first pro of Viktor, play him right now. Just go in a game right now and just play him. I promise you he is strong, you will do great, and you'll just destroy your opponents. I feel like ever since Viktor got his rework a few patches ago, he's been very strong. But only recently have people been finally picking him up and realizing his true potential. One of the main things that makes Viktor so absurdly strong is his upgraded E ability, the laser. I mean, the after effect damage that it can do on a single target is extremely high, and it can also clear waves in a second. Its poke potential is definitely up there as well, nothing like a Xerath or maybe Vel'Koz, but it's still pretty good. But probably the most overpowered thing about Viktor right now that I'm honestly expecting a nerf on is going to be the damage he can do, throwing out his Q, auto-attacking with the bonus damage he gets from the Q, and also having a Lich Bane. The damage from that alone is more than many champions can dish out and probably like a full combo. His W definitely provides a nice CC in an AoE area around where you cast it. I feel like a lot of people also underrate this skill. And overall, Victor has a lot of burst damage, has consistent damage because, I mean, the cooldown on your Q with 40% CDR is like 2.5 seconds. Ridiculous, absolutely mind-blowing. He's got consistent and burst damage coming out with his ultimate, and overall just a strong champion. Please pick him up. The cons of Victor, not the best poke in the game. I mean, yeah, his laser isn't bad, but it is a little awkward to use if you're not used to it, and the range isn't anything crazy. And probably the main reason why he's been underrated for so long is because he doesn't have really any good escapes. I mean, his W is okay, but it's nothing too crazy. And since his abilities don't have the longest range, it can make it so that he's overextending too often. But that is it for this video, guys. Those are my current top 5 underrated AP mid laners. Definitely pick him up, at least some of them, while they're still underrated and while many people just simply don't know how to face them. If you did enjoy this video, guys, please throw in a like, share it with your friends, check out my other videos as well. I'm sure you'll like them too. But as usual, guys, hope you enjoyed it and hope to see you for the next one. Peace.